Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Creating Creators Podcast. On today's episode, I had the chance to sit down and talk with Ginnard Archibald. Ginnard is a freelance photographer and videographer. He has many years of experience, both working at an agency as well as working freelance on his own. He shares a lot about some of the projects that he's worked on, as well as just sort of the history in his life that sort of has made him the creative that he is today. Ginnard and I were able to find a lot of common experiences. So I really do feel like this conversation went in a direction that I'm proud of and that I learned a lot through, and I think you will as well. Ginnard also shares a recent project that he and some other creatives have launched, and I really do think that this new endeavor that they've launched, first of all, is going to be incredible for other freelancers and creatives in the Birmingham area, as well as just a really neat experience for the rest of us to just sort of watch and hopefully learn from. So check out this conversation with Ginnard Archibald. Let me go ahead and acknowledge, at least bring up a question that I have right off the bat, because Archibald in the Birmingham area, to me, there is a prominent name, specifically with news, that comes to mind. John Archibald. Is there a relation there at all?
No, I wish. I mean, because John Archibald's, I mean, he's a legend in Birmingham. But I will say that I did get to work with John. Like we got to collaborate on a piece together. He actually wrote the narration for a little short vignette that we did on Birmingham called Black and White. And he wrote like a poetry piece that tied nicely with it because we were both working at Alabama Media Group together. He was more on, he does what John does best. And
Right.
then he wanted to dabble into some video, and we collaborated on a piece, and that piece ended up winning a regional Emmy. It was my first regional Emmy was with John Archibald. So
Yeah,
that was awesome.
he is definitely, I would say, a legend and just an incredible writer and investigator, story breaker. I mean, he really. I've always been a big fan of his. I personally grew up in the Birmingham area. I grew up in Hueytown. I understand you also grew up in Birmingham. Where did you grow up in Birmingham area?
I'm on the outskirts of Birmingham. I would say that I lived in the suburbs of Birmingham. But I went to Oak Mountain High School, did the Oak Mountain leg from elementary all the way up to high school. I was
Yeah.
in Cava Heights for a little bit when I was in kindergarten, pre-K and all that, but we moved over to Oak Mountain, pretty early on. So, but we never ventured like downtown to the metropolitan area really often. I mean, I don't think anybody did uh,
Right, right.
that
I
time.
I was I used to teach in Jefferson County, and I worked at one school. It was more of a rural school on the other side of Hueytown, and and a lot of the kids there. Whenever I tried to take them down to Birmingham, I was going to take them to. I think we went to Night Edie, and then we were going to go to like a Barons game or something,
Hmm.
or maybe it was the Sports Hall of Fame. I took them to, and they were nervous about going to Birmingham. They're like, I haven't been to Birmingham, and this wasn't that long ago. So Birmingham had definitely been doing a lot of revitalization in the downtown areas, and you had some incredible spots to go to. Well, the first thing we do as we're coming into Birmingham, one of the kids looks out the window and says, "Well, that guy's naked." And sure enough, there was a guy, I guess, cleaning himself or bathing himself, like on a stoop right there in downtown Birmingham. And I was like, "Well, welcome to Birmingham." But it's definitely an incredible place to go to. I think I love going downtown. In regards to Oak Mountain, real quick, I work for Shelby County Schools now, so I frequent Oak Mountain High School who was there a teacher at Oak Mountain that you recall that was really influential in your upbringing or your
Yeah, I mean,
career?
there's probably one. I mean, I mean, my kindergarten teacher always believed in me, so I'll give her credit. Miss
Those are
Jefferson.
always the best.
Yeah,
What
she
was her
was
name?
Miss Jefferson. She was awesome. I do remember, like, you know, obviously like my first real teacher, but she, if I would have had her in any grade, she would have been super supportive and awesome. But I wouldn't say that I had a really, I probably definitely one stands out. I just think it's weird because my gap is from it's from kindergarten and then senior year is the teacher. Like so Miss Jefferson to Miss Playa, my literature teacher. Um, I actually told her that I had you know, school in general for me was very difficult because I'm dyslexic and also have a speech impediment that I work through. So just like going to school day to day, then also just being ADHD and like bouncing off the walls was just like super difficult for me. So I didn't look forward to going to school like everybody else did because, you know, I was that guy sitting in the chair, like hoping that the teacher wasn't going to call on me during, you know, English class to like, you know, read Shakespeare out loud in front of everybody. So, super anxious almost every day going to school just because of those, you know, disadvantages in that sense. But I will say that the person I end up respecting the most scared the crap out of me, which is my literature teacher in 12th grade. I actually had this formula down where I would every year I would go to the classes that or go to the teachers that would you know have you do things like out loud, like read out loud, do things out loud, like pull them outside. So like as soon as they do roll call, you know, they introduce themselves, you know, I'll find time and you know approach them and be like, hey, can I chat for you for a minute? I just want to inform you on some things just so I can remove the try to control the scenario like in the future of like getting called to read a passage or anything like that. And I remember doing that with Miss Playa and going back in and feeling like I had accomplished like what I needed for the year. She was super cool. And as soon as we sat down, she told us to open up like the Canterbury Tales and start going into Beowulf and that story. And she called on me and she brought me to the front of the class and had me read literally the whole passage aloud in front of everybody.
Wow.
Uh, and so there was a very much a lot of, I remember after that day, it was so embarrassing. I mean, I pushed through, but I went to the principal's office and I was like, I need to transfer out of this classroom. And they're like, we can't do it. We can't do it. And what it ended up doing for me, which is why I appreciate her so much, is because it allowed me to, well, one, go home and practice so I wouldn't be embarrassed, and then read passages in advance. But the literature I was reading, I actually really loved. I wasn't reading much at all because of my dyslexia. So, like, I just removed that entirely. I mean, like, I literally would look at a book during class and just stare at it and live in my imagination and just like turn fake pages. Like that was my day to day at school when we read. So in this scenario, I was forced to read these stories because we are going to be quizzed on them, or I would have to read them out loud. And I ended up loving just American literature in general. And then even getting into writing and poetry, which she would have us read anything that we wrote out loud. But through that, I gained a lot of confidence and trust in myself and my ability, and found a talent for storytelling creatively with my words that I never knew I had, just because of her.
Well, I think it's an incredible. First of all, I'm glad that we went down this little bit of a rabbit hole because I wasn't. This isn't necessarily in the plan, so to speak.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing. So, secondly, like I can relate so much to your situation. In second grade, I didn't learn to read with everyone else. I actually sort of changed schools mid-year, and I don't know. There may have been a diagnosis that could have been given to me, but in either case, I struggled reading all the way into college. Even still, my wife, whenever I start reading stuff, she'll say, "Just hand it to me," because I'm slower at reading
Same.
than she is. And I do think that that contributed to me being a very much of a visual learner, which
Hmm.
plays really well into sort of being a visual storyteller. And also though I had many of those same moments in school where it was like, please don't call on me, please don't call on me, because I was typically embarrassed to read out loud in class. So how is there any other way that you feel like that experience has sort of carried you forward in your career, either as an entrepreneur, because I understand you do freelance, which we'll get more into later, or just in general, like in your creative journey?
That experience just from Miss Pia's class. Is that what you're saying?
Well, just in general of being a sort of a struggling reader, or definitely that experience
Oh yeah,
itself.
100%. Yeah, I am. You know how they say that like, blind people have like really super human ears, and then
Yeah.
how people that can't hear can see like better than normal people can see. I will say that since I couldn't read, my brain wasn't compartmentalized so much in that world that my attention to detail when it comes to observing people, like emotion, body language, all of those things, composition, I went like superhuman on. There's not a time where I go anywhere and I'm not observing my surroundings, the lighting, the way the light hits the table, the environment, the color temperature of the bulbs that are being used at a coffee shop compared to like a hotel. Like I can't even walk into a hotel and turn on lights, and if they're at, you know, if they're daylight balanced or, at 3200 or anything super cold, I'm like turning those off completely, or either finding a bulb somewhere else and swapping them out. uh, Especially Airbnbs, you'll find that like the Airbnb units, they'll have all those blue bulbs. I feel like I'm going under the knife, like someone's gonna like do surgery. I like that, it'll mess with my head, like this room's not supposed to be lit this way. Um, but to answer your question, yes, I feel like because I had this disadvantage in school that um, I was able to kind of like amplify this sense of visual more because of that. That's
Okay.
my theory, anyways.
Yeah, I can see some similarities just in my experience, but I feel like maybe you carry it a step further than what I do. My wife gets frustrated, or not frustrated, I'd say. She probably gets tired of me pointing out constantly white balance, or like a shift in the lighting, but it does. I think being a videographer has taught me to appreciate light in general, especially the way it just happens naturally.
Hmm.
I used to have a decent drive to work, and I would pass by this field that would have fog on it with trees, and the light would be breaking through the trees, and just the beauty of that moment was always something that I took note of. And
Yeah.
I think just in general, being a videographer has helped me with that. So
Yeah, it's like staring at a candle for me. Like, you know how, you see a candle lit for the first time, you're just kind of like, oh, this is mesmerizing. That's just like a day in the life for just waking up and, brushing my teeth.
yeah,
And
yeah.
or making my coffee and looking at the steam coming off the top of it. Like I'm thinking of like three different angles, or like how it would look at 120 frames per second or 240 frames per second. Uh, you know,
That's
all kinds of things that run through my head that I thought that everybody else did, and it was normal,
that's cool.
but not.
Let me make a side note, just a technical note. We're definitely having a little bit more lagging on this than what we typically have, so I apologize
Yeah.
for that. It may be on my end. It doesn't matter whose end it's on,
Hmm.
but I hope it's not too distracting for you if I'm like off, or seems like visually the graphics end up
No,
bad. Let me know
I
if there's an issue.
it looks like I'm not seeing any delays on my end.
Okay, good,
Uh,
good.
so
All right, so I do want to jump into a couple of visuals for us to go along with, and I want you to just simply touch on, just introduce yourself in general, like who is Ginnard Archibald? Um, Give me a little bit. I mean, you've already given me some of the stuff, especially
Hmm.
with your younger
I
years,
love these
but
pictures
who
you've
are you?
chosen for me, by the way,
I tried
especially
to
the
be
one with the
pretty
glasses and
select.
the biting of the tongue.
Yeah, I tried to be selective in the images. You were, I would say, relatively easy to find some really great photos of. So, and hopefully you'll enjoy the rest of them that show up throughout this. So, I appreciate
Yeah,
you being so much of a sharer on social media,
yeah,
and I
for
apologize
sure.
for the stalker that I am at times.
No, you're good. You're totally good. Um, God, who is Ginnard Archibald? I would say that Ginnard Archibald is an anomaly. I don't think he can really explain. I mean, half of the shit that comes out of my mouth, I have no idea where it comes from. It just runs straight through me. There's moments actually where I either shoot something or say something, and the process of like understanding it happens later. I'm just as surprised as everybody else.
Okay, all right. So I've got to interrupt you again, and I'm sorry to
Yeah.
keep interrupting. Let me know if I'm being annoying, but you might be the person that I relate to, at least in the first, 15 minutes of our conversation, that I've ever related to. Because that exact thing I've said about myself on so many different occasions.
That's hilarious. Well,
Yeah,
good. Glad to
because
know I'm not alone.
no, not at all. Maybe I'm discovering more about myself through this conversation. So I appreciate you sharing this stuff. But I feel the exact same way. Most of the time, I people, if they say, "Man, that was really good," I was like, "I'm just as surprised as you are right now."
Hmm.
So
Yeah. Yeah, I know. And you know what it is there is some understanding of what it is. I think I think I trust that so much now, especially more that, there's there's so many avenues that I can go down on just like the psychological approach of like who I am and like emotional and just experience. But it took me probably the last maybe 3 years of my life that I actually started trusting that, um, and letting it kind of snowball in a positive way. Whereas before, you know, identity of who I am or what I want to be or what I want to create has never really stood out. Like some people just have like a really good skill at something and they pursue it, or you know, or they're not pursuing their skill at all. And I feel like I have these micro skills of many things, but like none of them really like stand out more than the other. And I have a hard time figuring out which one I want to. And those examples would be like either being a cinematographer or being an editor or being a photographer or being a sound designer or directing. Um, I know one thing I can't do is act, so that'll be.
I
But
feel
yeah,
your pain there.
yeah, I don't like being in front of the camera. You won't see me in front of the camera at all. Because the thing is you can see my brain thinking about the shot, and I'm like, and before you know, if you need like somebody that's in a psych ward that looks like they need to be in a straitjacket, then
You
yeah,
got that role.
put me in a scene. I could I could definitely be that person for you because that's just me. Period. Just like looking around, observing. Um, but yeah, so to go back to the question, who's Gennaro Archibald? An anomaly that I'm still trying to figure out, but and grateful that it's interesting. I do keep myself entertained for
Well,
sure.
I've talked recently. I say recently; it's been a little while now, but I've talked with Dustin Harrelson, who I think is safe to say is a fan of yours, definitely.
Yeah,
And
Dustin's
the two
great.
of y'all worked together at Telegraph, correct?
Hmm.
And Dustin talked about just how he was really, I think before working at Telegraph, was really impressed with the stuff that Telegraph was creating. specifically in line with video work. And I had noticed the same thing. I had seen Telegraph and their social content, and then he said he got into working there, or maybe had reached out and communicated with you, and realized that you were behind a lot of the really impressive video work that was going on there. So first of all, let me just say, like, I know how talented Dustin is and the kind of stuff that he's done, and he credits a lot of what he's learned to you. So first and foremost, you are a very talented person. The work that I see, not only in Telegraph, but also in Ginnard.com, as well as your social content, whether it's just a personal vacation or whether it's work. Obviously, you've got an eye for where to point the camera to, and then you've also got a great feel for the edit, it feels like. So props definitely on that stuff.
Thanks, man. Thank you.
Yeah.
For sure.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about your journey. How did you become a videographer, a photographer, cinematographer? How did you step into this world?
Golly, I'm just looking at these photos. Um, these are great. Is that a sleeveless shirt? Oh my gosh. Um, oh man, how did I start? You know, what's so crazy is that I was so terrible in school that my GPA was just absolute, dog crap. Like I didn't even try. I didn't think
Do you
that much in
recall your
advance.
GPA whenever you graduated high school?
Oh, it was like it definitely wasn't a three. It was
No,
like a
mine
two.
was mine was a 2.8 when I graduated high school.
Yeah,
I
I'm pretty
couldn't have
sure
gotten
mine
into a
was.
university if I wanted to.
Yeah, mine was like a 2.5. Like
Yeah.
it was low. And but I think even in that time, I knew. I don't know. The universe really did kind of lay a path for me because there's no reason for it. But they during that time, I couldn't go to like Auburn or Alabama. My ACT scores were crap. SAT scores were crap. So it was my GPA. So in that moment, I was like, community college is the best for me, and then maybe I'll just figure it out later. That's really what it is. I'll figure it out later. I was way too young to figure out what I wanted to do. I honestly think that anybody in high school right now is way too young to figure out what they want to do. I didn't figure out what I wanted to do much later, but I think I was forced into what I'm doing now because of my disadvantages, because I was like, oh, I like movies. Is there, my mom and dad, I got to credit my mom and both of them because they were like, what are we going to do? Like, where's Ginnard going to go to school? I mean, my dad's a doctor, like he's a psychiatrist, very successful, works really hard, did well in school. And then you've got this ADHD child and, terrible test taking skills. And what is he going to do with his life? And they found a school in Orlando called Full Sail, and it's a technical school, and they just got accredited to be a university. So my dad was like, at least send them there so he can get like a bachelor's degree in something. You had to apply through like creative work, and at that time, junior and senior year, I was kind of playing with my dad's cameras. I was playing with a couple of his old film cameras and video cameras, and I was doing what you see on my stories, but with little DV tapes, and I was editing on iMovie, the Apple editing software. But I
Yeah.
was doing that for my friends and burning them on little DVDs and giving it to them. So if I went to a spring break in 2006 with my friends, I had like a little mini cam, a little Sony Handycam that I shot like everything with, and then I would cut it together, and then we would do like a viewing party, and they would be like, what the heck, this is awesome. So when I was doing that, my dad was like, why don't you apply this to a field? Like, and in my mind, I'm thinking like, at this time, it's doctors and lawyers, nurses, or you go into the technical field of mechanic or whatnot. So, that was new to me, and I found out about this school, and the only downfall is that it's super expensive to go to. So we took a buttload of student loans out to do it, and signed up. Went 2006. All they called full sale full male because it was all males. There wasn't any females there, which is a good thing because females were distracting in general. to me. So it was 2 years accelerated, which is insane. Like to do 8 to 12 hours a day, and everything was hands on. So it couldn't have been better for me. We learned photography 101 from shooting on 35 millimeter to developing our own film, dodging, burning, doing all that stuff to, directing classes to lighting classes. We had 2 months of lighting, 8 to 12 hours a day of just going and setting up lights and scenes. And you'd rotate and see like who would light this scene and like how to set up sandbags and, 3-point lighting, the whole shebang, we had a final film project at the end of it. I did love the school, like in terms of the training and all that, but I wasn't a huge fan of a lot of like the majority of the classmates because everyone thought that they were the director or the person to lead everything. There wasn't a lot of team players. So I naturally didn't want to be a team player to their projects. So I kind of just like stayed behind the scenes, literally shot the behind the scenes video for the final film that everyone worked on. Because, it was a lot of politics, but pushed through, graduated in 2008, $100,000 in debt, 6 months to start paying that. I thought since my dad, was successful that he would buy me a red camera and let me start my career. And he was like, nah, dude, you need to go if you can't find a job. Also in 2008, let me reverse for a second. 2008, the market crashed
Yeah.
and nobody was hiring. I graduated like right when that happened. And everywhere I applied at ABC 3340 to be a photographer, to just be the camera guy. They turned
Right.
me down. I applied at
They would
WBRC.
take you in a heartbeat right now, just FYI. Okay.
I applied to any local news organization. I applied for Turner Studios as an intern in Atlanta just to be like their like assistant editor. They weren't hiring. It was sad. So I ended up, my dad wasn't going to help me out, which ended up being a good thing for me because I was ready to be a director in my mind and cut movie trailers. That's what I really wanted to do. I wanted to be a movie trailer editor. Um, and so once I once I finally grabbed a job, it was at Walmart. I was like working in their photo department, actually for the region, and training like Walmart managers and associates on like specific instant print machines. So the instant print machines that you see like at Walmart, and you go and you put your little SD card in. I was that guy that like managed and helped people, customers out, like printing their pictures out for like 2.5 years. Uh, and what that allowed me to do is I was able to save up enough money. I was living at home with my dad and bought my first camera, which was a T3i. Um, that's a crop sensor. It's a
Hmm.
hybrid. It wasn't a. I don't think the Mark II had come out yet. The Canon Mark II that everyone loved, that just like changed the game for
Right.
photographers and shooters. But I used that to start shooting weddings, and I did those for free. And I knew that if I could shoot photos that, and in the state of Alabama, moms here, they love some photography for their daughters. And I was doing some funky stuff with my photography at that time. I was already breaking the rules. I will say that even in film school, there were the like the 180 rules and all that stuff, man. I was a rule breaker. I wanted to be like, screw these rules. I'm gonna manipulate this, change it, do whatever I want. I hate when someone tells me that there's a rule. I'm immediately trying to break it. Uh, because in my mind it's for reasonings I can understand why it could be a little jarring in certain scenarios, but it doesn't mean that you have to live it. It shouldn't be law. Um, but sorry, I know I'm rambling,
No, no, I
but
love it. I love it.
yeah.
Let me piggyback on that for just a moment because there's a specific video, and let me look at my next. Okay, so my next slide is talking about your work, and I wanna jump to this real quick just because I know just because you mentioned that specific thing, but there's a video of yours that I was watching yesterday, and so this is called First Truck Documentary. This
Hmm.
is this with Yellowwood? Is that the
Yeah,
yeah?
that's with
So
Telegraph. We Telegraph actually. This is while I was there.
okay, so you talk about breaking the rule a little bit. The actual interview shot in this video. Why can't I find it? Here it goes. This wide shot right here. I love this shot, but it is a little bit off from what is typical. You know, typically you would have him on the right side of frame looking left, right? You're shooting on his shadow side. But the
Hmm.
fact that you've got him on the left side of the frame looking left, there's not that like lead room.
Hmm.
I It's such a beautiful shot. I know this probably isn't necessarily fully the rule breaking because this still does follow most of the rules, but I just
Hmm.
love the fact that he was off center in this and looking and I say that just was there reasoning behind this in general, or is this just one of those things? Hey, I'm going to set it up the way that I think looks the best and screw what people would say is typical.
Well, we I co-directed that with Kat May
Okay.
at Telegraph, and we've worked together for several years before we did this together. But one thing about our relationship is that we are constantly always battling each other in the most positive way. But when it came to shooting any interview, we're always dialing it in. I can't give you the very specific reason why we framed him up that way. I know that we really like that bar stool in the back
Yeah.
that's actually
Yeah.
being uplit by like a couple of small little LED panels just to kind of add accents. If you go back to that shot, there's a couple of different lights like to his left over his right shoulder.
Yeah.
There's a light there. You can see a little bit of light coming off of that. I guess that stool, that barber stool.
Yeah.
Um, we just threw a bunch of, but I think what we did in that scenario, we really just liked the composition of it. Um, and we didn't want to have them centered. To give you an answer, there isn't one. It felt good.
Well,
It
and
looked good. It felt good.
that's what it sounds like you're saying in
Hmm.
general. Like if it feels
Hmm.
good, who cares what the rule is?
Hmm.
But man, I thought this was a beautiful video. It was shot beautifully. Not to mention the story's pretty incredible whenever you get through it and you
That's
find
Dustin right
out.
there.
Was that Dustin in that shot?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Where
So
did that shot go?
even though Yellowwood was, one of our main clients, we did a lot of this production. This is a crew of three. Yeah, crew of three. This isn't Dustin here. This is the
Oh, sorry.
mechanic. You're
Where's
good. It's the
the
guy. I think it was
oh,
right there.
and
We're
this
basically
one?
talking about Jimmy when he was younger. Yep, when he was younger and not knowing if he was going to be able to survive as a businessman and business owner. So we had Dustin. We put a 300D Mark II aperture light out there.
Yeah.
We had a little hazer inside the room to kind of create that morning kind of vibe. I remember having an argument with Kat on what the color temperature we were going to have. The light outside, it was going to be either warm or if it was going to be blue. But I was like, it's morning time. It's got to be warm. It's got to be like, and she's like, no, I think it's got that cool blue that, and so we ended up going with that warm because
So
I
you're
pulled rank on her
there you go.
because
There you go.
I pulled rank on her, but mainly because I was the DP for it. She did lead a lot of the directing and just the piece in general. So when it came to the style and how it was going to look, I felt like it needed. But I think at the end of the day, we both looked at it and saw like, hey, yeah, we made the right call. So
Well, it really is a beautiful video, and
thanks, man.
I enjoyed discovering it because as I was going through doing the research on this was something that I had not seen, I guess, recently in your social work or social media, just because I guess it is an older video of yours, but it looks
Well,
incredible.
I have this habit of really only posting my personal slash fun things on my face or my Instagram, my
Yeah.
social. A lot of my actual work, even the work that I'm doing now, I mean, it never really makes it to social just because they're shot, 16:9, and I'm a stickler about having something cropped, or going back in and cropping it in for 9:16. So I would say a lot of my work, like the We Are Magic video, the stuff I've done for
Oh, that's
NASCAR.
such a good
I
video,
mean,
man.
thanks, man. Team effort, Telegraph team during COVID. We did that in, God, 3 days, maybe 2 days shooting, and then we knocked it out. And I remember we slept at the office to get that edited because we wanted to get it out as soon as possible. Um, but that was a group effort. I mean, everybody involved and a small crew. Again, me, Kat, Dustin, with the help of some designers and graphic designers back at the office. But when it
The
came to shooting it,
voiceover, sorry, I'm sorry. The
yeah, yeah, yeah.
voiceover on that, was that written or was that something y'all found that the
So
mayor had
we
already said?
no, we actually had an awesome writer that we worked with at Telegraph, Susan Elliott. I think her last name's different now. She got married. Um, she's an incredible writer. She's one of my favorites. But she wrote that, and then we sent it to the owners of our company, and we were like, "Hey, can we get Woodfin to read this, narrate it?" And then he had some guy record it and send it to us. We were not super happy with the recording, and so I can't remember whose idea it was, but we made it sound like he was talking on like a PA system, to kind of compensate for, which was, I find that this happens a lot, is situations that end up being difficult or, don't really go the way that we imagined. We end up modifying them in a way that turns out better. So,
Yeah.
and that PA voice, that like going with that angle, I felt like it just worked out so much better than just having some clean audio. So we're actually super happy and grateful for their mistake.
Well, I think I've always said it's not what people see or in this case hear. It's what they don't see and they don't hear. If that makes sense.
Mhm.
Like the what you did that ended up messing up the shot or what you did that ended up making the audio not quite what you wanted. When you cover that up or when we hide that in the edit or you know what I mean, like the little finessing that you do to it to get it to work, that's what
Mhm.
that's what matters, not necessarily
Yeah.
the problem to begin with. So
Yeah.
um, how would you describe your work in general, especially, I mean, I know you've said already that you sort of do it all. You do photography, you do video, um, you do the editing side of it. How do you describe like your work or your style, if there is such a thing?
Oh man, never really even asked myself this question. Um, if you had to compare me to like, I don't know if this is going to answer your question, but if I had to compare myself to, I don't know, if we talked about like the Western days in people that like had rifles or you know shot with pistols or like I'm just like trying to like transport you to just like this completely different realm of folks. I guess I would have been the guy that never literally held the gun up, and the gun being my camera or my skill set or whatever. I always fire from the hip, and firing from the hip for some reason I get these accidental bullseyes that I can't account for, but they don't end up being bullseyes until after I've created it. And most of the time when I shoot, I even feel this till this day. And some people they would assume that I would never feel this way, but in my mind and how I feel when it comes to creating anything I do, it's not good enough. Like even in the moment that I'm shooting, I feel like there is just something wrong and I'm just like figuring it out and guessing. But the truth is that is always there and it never goes away. And now I've just gotten to the point now where I just kind of trust that it'll work out and it ends up working out. And when it doesn't, which is very few, surprisingly, and I am surprised by even saying that, because of shoots that I've gone into where we have like nothing that goes right, you know. and somehow it ends up working out. So in terms of my style, man, I am a very much like I feel energy. I go with the flow and I create on instinct. I mean, if it's anything, it's instincts. I try not to, if there is, you know, when I shot for Sloss Fest or some of the photography work that I did, when I was in the pit with other photographers, you know where I wasn't? Anywhere near those other photographers. You know, like it's a small pit, but I'm not trying to wait in line to get a shot next to the speaker because I can get a different angle. Or to get the same angle that everybody else is getting. I'm the guy putting the camera, probably breaking the rules, on the stage at the very front, literally dropping my camera in the front and shooting blind, like straight up. Um, but yeah, I mean, I would just say that I don't like to follow. I don't like to copy. I want to create a unique perspective in almost anything that I do. I want to show people a world or an experience or a maybe an emotion they hadn't felt before just through a unique or rare composition through lighting and visuals. So even with sound design, man, I love sound design. That's another level there.
That's so I was recently talking with Brian Curtin, I mentioned to you earlier,
Yeah,
and
he's great.
so he was basically saying something similar to what you were just saying in the first part. This idea of really almost like going into something thinking, how are we going to do this? You know, how are we going to make
Hmm.
this work? You know, like almost a little bit of self consciousness or timidness, I guess, a little bit, if that makes sense, or anxiety. Maybe that's a better term. Some
Hmm.
anxiety about it because you're like, are we good enough to really hit this mark that we have set for ourselves? And it's sort of wild to think of people like you or him who I admire their work having some very similar feelings whenever they walk into it. But I told him, I was like, I think if you were working with somebody that was overly confident, that's probably a dangerous situation to be in. You know what I mean? Like, I would rather work with somebody that says, I don't know how we're going to get it done, but I'm going to work my ass off to get it done, you know, versus
Yeah,
being walking in with somebody saying, I got this, no problem.
yeah.
You know what I
Well,
mean?
careful
Like,
what you wish for.
exactly that anxiety, that anxiety sometimes can be, it can push you, I think, to go
Yeah.
beyond what you thought was possible. So,
I have this theory that the anxiety of not knowing what to do sparks a creative like window that now wouldn't have existed if there was a lot of control, right? So I do probably get criticized in a formality, like from a formality standpoint of how I approach projects, because I do imagine and create a lot in my head that I don't really explain, and I do a lot of um, like visual discovery, like literally the nights before I shoot or something like that. It's never on paper. You don't want to see my handwriting. It's terrible. And it's because I don't write anything down. Because most of the time it is just kind of scattered and lives amongst my head. And then like I go to a shoot and they're like, so what are we doing? I'm like, oh, well, we're going to start out really wide and we're going to move in really tight. And if there's moments where we want to shift or change just based on, what we're witnessing in the moment there, then we will add it to the shot list and we will shoot it.
it
And
reminds me of a chef. You know, like you think about like your grandmother
mhm,
cooking in the kitchen. If you asked her, sorry, that randomly pops
no,
up, but
you're good.
if you ask her like how tell me your recipe for this. How much
Yeah.
seasoning do you put in this? They would they would tell you, I don't know. You just do it. You just feel it, you know? And I think that's
Hmm.
what it sounds like. It sounds like that good southern grandma chef in the kitchen that you can't really explain the recipe. You just got to
Hmm.
feel it in there.
Yeah. No, 100%. I probably scared the hell out of Dustin. when we brought him on for the first time, because they were like, we're shooting a Yellowwood shoot, and I'm handheld with the camera. We've got one light that we float around, and that's it. Some ND filters, some different lenses. I was shooting on the 50 a lot at that time. Um, you know, so he was probably just like, what's going on? Um, and there you gain a lot of trust from that over time, especially when you get the results and you're done, you look back and you're like, God, if they only knew what we did to get this or how we got this. I mean, you should see some of my ghetto, what are there's that website or that Instagram account that's
The
like,
shitty
oh,
rigs.
shitty rigs. Oh, bro, I've got some shitty rigs for you, man.
I
You would
like
never
it.
guess the stuff that I have literally gaff taped, duct taped to just make the shot work.
Hey, I
Um,
love that Instagram account. It gives me
yeah,
ideas.
yeah, yeah. I've looked at stuff on there and I'm like, man, I'd have double the amount of followers if I had ever documented my shitty rigs,
There you go.
with all the
Hey,
gaff tape and things. But at
no
the end of
better
the day,
time to
it's not
start,
about,
man.
it's all about getting the shot, right? So nobody knows how it happened. If nothing breaks, we're good.
And if it does break, as long as you got the shot before it broke, right?
Yeah, but ultimately, you probably need that piece of equipment to use for the next shot.
That's
So the
true.
goal is not to break anything at all, or
All right,
crash any
so
drones.
I do want to take a moment and talk about Supernaut. I'm assuming that I'm pronouncing that correct, also, right?
You are. Hmm.
So Supernaut, I've come across. I mean, I'm assuming this is relatively new. Am I correct? Is this what you currently see yourself like employed as? Which I use that term loosely because, from what I understand, it's a creative collective, which means that it's like a collection of freelancers. Is that correct?
Yeah, so Supernaut does not have a single full-time employee, and we do have a brick and mortar. We share an office with her husband, Michael Clark, who is second row law, and then Campesino is also in our office. But yeah, we are literally we've got four main folks. We've got our attorney Michael Clark. We've got Ashley who runs. She's our creative producer, so she's our go-to producer when it comes to planning and scheduling. She also runs the books for us, taxes, gets people paid. I run video, photography, that side, creative direction in that world. And then Shannon Clark, um, who is just a creative genius in her own, amazing branding, graphic designer, you know, type. She's the Michael Jordan of design. She's great. So we are just a team of four collective creatives that we come together on some main clients, like Alabama Power. We've got some other contracts I don't even know if I'm allowed to talk about, but we come
Yeah.
together on those, and then we have a collective of people that actually submit their skill sets so that when we have other jobs, we can bring them in. So um, we're currently working on. I can't say the name of it yet because there is no name, but there will be a new account, an Instagram account coming soon that will be very focused on Birmingham creatives and people just doing awesome things. There'll be a short little 60-second vignettes shot by the Supernaut crew, and our goal is to crank those out one or two episodes a month and keep it alive. And the way that it would work is the referrals will come from each person that we shoot. We'll find somebody that maybe Birmingham doesn't know about. Um, so we're super pumped about that. But when it comes to Supernaut, man, it's just we are trying to empower creatives that are freelancing. Freelancing is super difficult. If you ever go off on your own and you're working full time and you think it's just like, rose colored sunglasses, then they're not. It is in certain ways that you have creative freedom, but it's scary knowing that you don't know if you're going to be able to pay your rent or mortgage next month just because it's dry. And we were fortunate enough to get some really awesome clients like Alabama Power, who started us on a series. a documentary series, and we're we're fortunate to have them, and that allows us to kind of branch out into smaller jobs, and getting people employed, getting people jobs, and
Well,
working with us. You
it's
know.
a really neat concept, in which I don't know that it was. I'm sure y'all probably had some type of inspiration from elsewhere, but I think it's a really great concept because, like I said, just talking with Brian Curtin, who works at Biggs, you got an agency like that
Hmm.
that employs pretty much everyone that they work with for the most part. It's sort of neat to then have a thing like Supernaut where it's this sort of gosh, what would I mean? It's a team of freelancers that then have the opportunity to work separately, but then also together. It seems like freelancing now more and more is just a at least in people's mind the first step in going full time in this kind of stuff.
Hmm.
I talking with Dustin. He's a freelancer. I've wrestled my whole time in video and photography with the idea: should I ever step out? It's always a scary situation, especially if you're stepping away from things like a salary, retirement, other kind of health benefits.
Yeah.
Um, that's a scary time. But that's cool
It
that y'all
is.
have got this.
Yeah, it's great. I think the key thing for us is that if you are a potential client and you're looking for work from, you're building a restaurant for the first time, or you're going to open a bar, and you have a certain style or energy that you're trying to go for. I felt like what sets us apart is, you know, if a restaurant or this company, for example, has a design style that we know will work good for one of our freelancers that are in our roster because of their style, we're not pinning you down to our only designer that we have, or the only two designers that we have in an agency, where like, one could be a little bit, everyone's got their own style, right? So
Right.
I feel like that was our issue with working full time anywhere is, well, one, not having enough time to fully flesh out a creative idea and being able to execute the way that you want to. Mainly because of budgets. I mean, I get it. You got to pay salaries for these people, and there's a certain amount of time and budgets and all that. But like at Supernaut, we're gonna make sure that like we put in the time that we want, and if we go over on hours and we're not going to get paid for it just because we want to craft the idea for a piece just because we believe in it so much, or if we want to make sure that we tailor the right designer or the right composer to a piece, that when it's completed, everyone looks at each other and we're so happy that we did that. We worked really hard on that together. So
So is the appeal for you just that more flexible control? Um, I mean, is
creative
that
freedom.
yeah,
It's really creative freedom. And we get to choose our clients,
yeah,
which is great. I mean, we've been fortunate enough to get like some really good like longer term contracts, which has allowed us to, if someone comes to Supernaut and they fill out our creative brief, and their budget is super low but they're asking for the moon, we're like, we're not, I don't think we're a good fit for you.
yeah,
um, but if they have a crazy budget, or they have a budget at all, and they trust us, then and we're also like, the best thing about what we do is we are client to creative. So like, there is no like AE or some person that's, and no disrespect to AEs, you need them because they keep things going, but like they're communicating on behalf of the creatives. If you're going to spend money on a creative project, and you're trusting us with this budget and the vision, you should talk to the creative behind it, the one that's literally going to be shooting it, editing it, designing it. Like, the fact that there's this like invisible wall sometimes at agencies where like the creatives are just kind of like sitting in their rooms, and then they report, then when they're just told what to do, and then they're given a certain amount of hours, it's just not a good recipe for creatives. And Supernaut is the opposite of that. If you come to us and we sit down and we talk about, what kind of work we're going to do, if we're going to have any kind of copy or written stuff done, the writer is going to be at that meeting. The graphic designer is going to be at that meeting. The web developer is going to be at that meeting. The video director is going to be at that meeting, and we're all going to talk, and we're all going to be on the same page. And we're all going to shoot the same ideas out, or we're going to spitball and brainstorm, and then to me that is just, and face to face conversations. Like we're losing that. The emails, oh man, I can't do another email unless it's an invoice that needs to be paid. So, or if I need to send out a W-2 or a 1099, like it should be. We need to be a little bit more intentional about how we communicate. And I feel like the best way, and I get knocked for this sometimes, it's like, hey, we need to have a 30-minute meeting with this client. It's like, well, I want to bring him in. Like, I want to feel his body language. I want to know how he's feeling about like the process so far and like where we're at. Do we need to give more? Do we need to cut back in certain things? Do we need to push harder? Like, let's get a sense of where we're at.
How long ago did you leave a full-time job, and
Uh,
what was the scariest part of that for you?
um, it was 2022, would have been, I think, in May of 2022. Um, 2 weeks vacation wasn't enough time for me. That was my first problem.
I totally
Uh,
get that. Totally get that.
I My creative juices get worse if you put me in a box. I have to be free to roam and go where I please. So that's a lot of the reasons why there's that of structure of how working full time is, and then just you know just that knowing that I have to send a request in to go on vacation, and it's 14 days.
Hmm.
It's giving me PTSD just thinking about it. But uh, yeah, that was the leap. But you know what? It was scary, but then like I always reminded myself of where I'm at. Like I wake up in the morning and I don't need to be somewhere at 8:30 or 9 o'clock, and I don't get in trouble for that. I don't. If I want to go really hard in the paint on working until 2 o'clock in the morning, then yes, I'm going to stay in bed until I. Some of my best work happens at night. Like my creative sweet spot, and I don't know if it's because I'm pushing my like if I'm getting sleep deprived, or if there's just like some magic chemical reaction that happens between 9 p.m. and 3 a.m. Like that's my creative sweet spot.
Wow. Yeah, that would be a
And
tough time for me.
and you know what it is? It's the biggest thing for me is like I organize and I clean things up and I kind of get my brain ready to actually start editing around like 11:30. And I think the main reason why is because I am ADD and I do get distracted, and it takes me about 20 minutes to get into a creative flow. And when that comes to editing or conceptualizing ideas for a shoot that I need to have planned or bring to the table the next day. But if my phone's going off and I'm getting Instagram like notifications, or if the neighbor downstairs decides to slam his door, or if I hear somebody outside, my brain like it it's not good for those scenarios. And dude, everybody's sleeping at 11:30 on a Tuesday.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I
Yeah.
ain't gonna hear nothing. My dog's asleep at 11:30. He's curled up. He's not looking up at me asking for food or snacks or anything like that. Like I'm locked in, and it's crazy. I've learned that I'm way more efficient in those hours in short amounts of time. Like if I start editing at 10 a.m. and I work until 5, I swear I can do that same amount of work from in terms of efficiency and creativity and creating a product, even in let's just say specifically editing. I can do that same amount of work in probably 2.5 hours than a full day, just because there's no interruptions. It doesn't take me, because if I'm not finding a flow throughout and I'm getting interrupted, then I'm always kind of resetting
Yeah,
throughout
I
the
can
day.
imagine. I can imagine working in a office full of creatives. I
Hmm.
would have a hard time not like having a conversation with this person and this person and this person, like, and when I need to be sitting and really plugging away. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I was a director too at Telegraph. So like I had like six people underneath me. So my door was always open, and it was always open, and I was always down to help people out, and I don't regret it. I love helping any creative and anything that they need help with. But there was, a disadvantage of me having to reset because I wasn't just like tassing things out and just sitting in my office waiting for, the next person to walk in. I was locked into an edit or getting ready to map out the next big shoot. And so it was just it wasn't very efficient, yeah, and
Yeah.
productive. Um,
All right. Speaking of efficiency and
yeah,
productive, I want to pay respect to your time, and I know we're
yeah.
pretty much at that limit of about an hour. And but I want to ask you maybe two more questions.
Dang.
So one is, what advice would you have for this guy? And really, that's just what's a lesson that you've learned that you would pass on to somebody else?
Oh man, that kindergarten picture. I mean,
You were a
that
cute kid,
day,
man.
that day I cried because that was when I got dropped off, and my
Oh
dad's heading
wow.
to work. He looks like a doctor leaving to work, and I remember I
Yeah.
cried because I did not. I was probably the only person I got dropped off that day that cried. Um, okay, so what advice would I give myself or that guy if he was like what, like pop, like coming up in another multiverse somewhere for the first
Yeah,
time? Is that
yeah,
okay? All
yeah.
right.
Or just somebody that's like coming up and aspiring to do what you've done, or just what big lesson have you learned along the way?
Trust your gut and your instincts. Like learn to listen to your gut and your instincts. Like figure out what it feels like um, when your gut is telling you something, and when it is and you ignore it and something bad happens, remember that. And then when you listen to it and something good happens, remember that. And then see that following your gut really will never, it really doesn't stray your way. I think the biggest thing for anybody in this younger multiverse version is that they don't know how to listen to it. And I think listening to it, people spend their whole lives trying to figure out how to listen to their gut. Um, and once you actually figure out like what that feeling or that sensation is, it is a compass, and it will lead you in the right direction. And that will apply to as creatives. I don't know if that applies more for creatives or if just being a creative being. Um, that's every one of us. We all have that gut instinct, that feeling. I mean, that's probably what we tap into as a creative. That's our like source of energy, right? That's where we tap into it and we figure out like what direction we're going to go. If it's a creative idea or if we're going to frame the camera a certain way, the gut's in there telling us how to do it, or if we should throw an extra sandbag on there for safety because this light is like 50 pounds and it shouldn't be hanging over this person's head. Don't just listen to your mind saying screw it, we're fine. Your gut's telling you to put some sandbags on it. um, but yeah, I mean, I could sit here and talk about so many different things, but I think the root of it, if you looked at it from like a tree branching out, the root of it is just listening to your instincts, learning how to listen to them, and listen to your gut.
That's good. I mean, I think probably the big thing that I take away from that is, um, don't be so rigid with your plans. Don't feel like you always
Hmm.
have to have every detail mapped out. But like you said, let that instinct sort of guide you at times, and
Yeah,
even pull you astray from the plan, so to speak.
yeah,
Yeah.
and run towards your fear. That's true. Like I had a lot of there's so many projects that I put off and so many things that I like would be doing, but if I had to look back, you know, fear has stopped me from so many different things. And that once I got into it, once I started chasing my fear, once I started like kind of trust falling into it, I realized I can handle it, and most people can. That's where you learn. That's where you get most of your experiences. Is from the things that scare the shit out of you. Um, so that's what helps you grow.
I like it. I like it. All right. So, last question. I'm going to go ahead and ask you, who inspires you? So, I use this question for two purposes. One is I want to hear from you, like what do you look at for references? Who do you look at for references? Who sort of helps you stay in the lane, so to speak, or move forward and advance? And then secondly, I usually try to use this as sort of a jumping off point to maybe a future conversation that I can have. So if it's somebody that you're friends with or that local, or somebody that is accessible, to you, and then maybe to me, I usually try to maybe have them as a future guest. Who inspires you in any of those ways?
Oh man, there's so many. Um, all right, for reference, this is more for like who you want to line up for your next one, or just like in any inspiration in general.
I like both.
Okay,
So yeah,
so outside of this world inspiration, um, Roger Deakins is like one of my favorite cinematographers. He's just incredible. His brain. I listen to the Deakins podcast anytime I can, which is an awesome podcast, by the way, if you haven't listened to it. He literally
yeah.
interviews just anybody in the industry and he asks the same questions, and you'll find out that they have just the craziest stories. But, anyways, Roger Deakins is just an incredible cinematographer. I love what he does with cinema. He blows my mind. I would say that he is front and center when it comes to cinematography. Um, Directing, Quentin Tarantino, like his style and his ability to stay in a shot way longer than most people, like even when it's uncomfortable, is just like amazing. And he has just so much grit and he doesn't care about what people think. He's probably the most, he inspires me so much that he just like, he does exactly who he is, no matter what. There's really not a lot of influence that's coming in. It's like his signature is on everything. That's like, I guess, big picture. I can go down the list too because there's so many. Um, but I would say, in our bubble, in our world that we live in, I remember when I first started shooting, I knew I had a gift for shooting. Like that isn't mine. It's like it's given to me. It's weird. I try to explain this to people. I'm surprised by it too. When I pick up a camera and I shoot something, but I never knew how to wield that control or that power. And the first time I ever really shot with somebody here locally that just kind of blew my mind. I think he's just a phenomenal shooter. Um, is Bob Miller. Have you heard of Bob Miller? Do you know who Bob Miller is?
Bob Miller. I don't think
Hmm.
so. I'm
He
trying to.
is he's under the radar, man. He's super chill and he does a lot of great work. I think I'm pretty sure that Chick-fil-A was his client at one point, doing work for them. And but he is just such a cool dude and such a great director and cinematographer. His energy, his vibe. He's just so patient. But yeah, the first time I ever shot with him, I was lugging a huge Pelican case full of lenses, gear, all this stuff that I'd like saved up and gotten over the years, and he just needed me as like a B camera. And I show up, and he's just got his one camera and his macro lens or his 50 that he's using, and he's just handheld. And I've got like a gimbal and these sliders. I'm literally not shooting anything because I've got too much stuff with me. And he's getting these beautiful shots just handheld on his own, just just shooting, firing from the hip. And so like some of the stuff that like I'll see him do. You ever looked at somebody and they're just like holding a camera and you're like, I wonder what he's getting. Like what does his eye see? What is he? What's he getting? And and I remember looking at Bob's shots because I had to edit some of his stuff, and I was just so jealous. Like I was just like, man, I was there when this was happening, and I didn't see it. You know,
Well,
and
his Instagram just grid looks beautiful.
yeah,
Some of these black and white shots
hmm
look really great. He's definitely got a great eye and some really great moments that he's captured here.
Yeah, he's a great guy. His office is actually on First Avenue North. But yeah, we've only worked on a couple of projects, but I mean, he's together. We worked on a Walt Whitman project that was an Alabama media group initiative. Um, but it was documentary shooting. It was the first time I ever really worked on documentary work, and I got to work with him and to see his eye and his attention to detail, and also just not have a huge list of plans and shot lists. Like he inspired me in that sense to make me feel like what I would do or am doing now is actually okay, you know? So
Yeah,
Bob Miller's definitely up there.
I think we limit ourselves sometimes because of the amount of looks like I went to something else. Anyway,
Yeah.
I think we limit ourselves sometimes because we think, we don't have all of what we need to do something, and
Hmm.
we at least I've been guilty of sort of aspiring to collect or rig out my gear, and in reality, I mean, what you really need is pretty simple and really accessible now. So
There's been so many times where I feel like, oh, well, I need this lens in order to be a better shooter, or I need this stabilizer to be a better, cinematographer, or I need, you know, this adapter or ND filter. And it's like, it's just another excuse to run away from just getting out there and shooting. Yeah, maybe it could be better. It might be better. I don't know. But at the end of the day, it's like, just go out there and shoot and quit buying. I have a habit of just like getting gear. Um, it helps with my taxes, but I
yeah,
can't stop getting gear because to me, gear is new perspective. How can I add a new perspective or angle or something like that to what I already create? So,
well,
um,
and I think it's something we always compare ourselves to others, and it's easy to look out and see, oh
mhm,
well, look what they're shooting with. Look at
yeah,
those lenses that he's got. That's the difference, you know.
hmm,
I've always heard it said the best camera is the one that's in your hands,
hmm,
and the principle behind that I believe wholeheartedly, but I have a really hard time making it practical in my life because I keep saying, "Oh, well, wait, no, but what about this camera? That I don't have, but that I'm thinking about." But ultimately, you can't go out and shoot with a imaginary or imagined camera. You can shoot with the one that's in your hands. So,
yeah, which ends up being my phone most of the time. Which I honestly think that's the greatest tool. If you had to ask me what my favorite tool is in my arsenal of gear, like it's not my Red Raptor 8K that shoots 120. It's not my cinema glass or stabilizers. It's my cell phone. My cell phone probably teaches me more about composition and shooting in general because if I can make it look good on my phone, then I know I can get that cinema camera and I can make it look great on that camera. If I can make it look good on this phone, then I should be able to create it with any other piece of equipment. There's no doubt.
I love that. That's definite truth right there. Well, Ginnard, I really do appreciate you just taking the time out of your day to talk with me. I do love the work that you've done. I look forward to
Thanks, man.
following along with the journey of Supernaut. I think that what y'all are doing is just a really cool I think cool opportunity for not only y'all but really the creatives in the Birmingham area.
Yeah,
So props on that, seriously, and thank you again.
for sure, for sure. Thank you. This was
Um,
great, and we also got to work together or something, man. I got to. I feel kind of ignorant when it comes to social. Sometimes I never really like spend the time to look through people's stuff. But when you reached out to me about this call, I was like, gotta learn about this guy. But I was looking at your work. It's great, man. It looks good. I feel like we gotta get on a project or get you signed up under Supernaut and get you on some collaborative pieces together.
I would love to, man. I mean, it
Yeah.
would anything like any chance I get to work with other creatives, I
Yes.
really enjoy it. So
Yeah.
I will sign up on that, no doubt.
Yeah,
So
and we've also got a studio that we're opening up. on Morris Avenue soon. That's going to be like a photography studio. I know that's a whole nother thing, but I want you to know that you're more than welcome to come up there. We'll be sending invites to like our creative event that we're going to have. Our grand opening is going to be an invitation out to local creatives, and so I'll make sure I'll shoot you one out to you. I think it's going to be towards the end of June. But yeah, we'll set up a photo slash cinematic like area where I'm gonna like basically stylize a scene,
Yeah.
and we're going to bring some creatives, and you can bring your film cameras, your red cameras, your Sony cameras or whatever, and just shoot something, and then also see the space and how it can be used, because eventually we'll rent that out at a day rate for people to use creatives at an affordable price, where you're not like losing 80% of your budget just renting the studio. So
Yeah.
our goal is to aim that towards creatives, and then also have a maybe a monthly meeting or something like that. I got to get some people that are way more organized involved, but yes, I want to be able to have like an area where people can come and, you know, talk about collaborations, maybe even go on a walk and take some pictures on film and come back, or maybe we do some developing there. I don't know. We'll figure it out, but I do want it to be um, you know, almost like a haven or nest for creatives, if they can't have access to a studio, or if, you know, one of the things I do notice in Birmingham is the creatives are kind of spread out everywhere, and they kind of get in their own little niches. You got your film people out there only doing film. You got your commercial people only doing commercials. You got your creative content creatives staying separate because they don't like each other. Uh, like we need a spot where like, people are, collaborate. We're all very similar, which is that we respect the art and we want to create. So I think once we get past, you know, any kind of, self-doubt and whatnot, you'll find that like everyone gets along. So I'm hoping that studio is a beacon for that, for Birmingham.
Well, man, I will definitely be there. I would love to, if I don't, if my wife and kids haven't planned something for me already,
Hmm.
I will be there whenever that thing opens, if that's an
For sure.
invitation. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
would
for
love to.
sure. And I do
One,
need to say, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
no, you go ahead, and then I'll
I was
finish up.
I was going to say, I know we talked about inspiring people, but one of my main creative partners, we've just been through a lot together, has been Shannon Clark, over at Supernaut. And I don't know who all you're interviewing or what the angle is, if it's just film or photography and whatnot, but she's just a creative mind in itself when it comes to design and just like creative direction. She's just been an awesome person to work with, and just her ability to create a logo or design that you think is just like, oh yeah, put these words together. No, it's much more than that. She goes into like the DNA of like where these colors come from, the history dating back like 2000 years ago, they did this, and this typography is, fits this realm. And I'm like, what? And then just to watch a presentation of like her thought process for things, absolutely insane. So, and just like having her as a creative partner and working in Birmingham has just been, I don't think she gets enough credit. Even though when she did go to the Addies, not this past year, but the year before, she swept the house. She does not like me talking about it, but she started Supernaut on her own before I had left Telegraph. And she literally submitted all the work that she did for a year, and she left with Best in Show and what was it? Not graphic designer, creative director of the year, I think, and then like seven other golden addies, just with just her,
Wow.
just she's a powerhouse. So
Well, I
I just
would
had to
love
add
to
her in
have
there
her.
just
I
because
would love to
she's
have her
she's
as a
incredible.
Yeah, I would love to have her as a guest. So I will definitely probably I'll follow up with an email with you and just get
Yeah,
her contact
yeah,
and
yeah.
and
Her or
schedule a
Bob
time.
are freaking awesome. So
Well, that's what Bob's stuff looked incredible. So I'll definitely have to
mhm.
check both of them out. Well, again, thank you so much for joining me
Yeah.
today. If you don't mind, I have one last thing I'd like to
Yeah.
talk about. And if you're okay with me leaving the recording on, because after I talk with you about it, I just want to ask you really if it's okay for me to share this.
Yeah.
If not, then I will cut just before I said what I just said. If it is okay, then I'll leave it in.
Yeah.
But there's a video that you put out, and I just want to I respect you, man, and I respect this kind of candidness. But you talked about being a stepdad, and you talked about sort of as a young person, like would you have ever been excited to step into that role, and you were like, hell nah, you know. Um, so I have a stepdad, and not too long ago he had a health scare, nearly
Mm.
died. In his mind, at least, he thought he was going to die, and he showed so much love and appreciation for the family that we have, and he's a granddad to my kids. And I talked to him one day. I'd been thinking it, and you can probably hear a little bit of shakiness in my voice right now, but I'd
Yeah.
been thinking this for a while. And I finally had got the guts up to just tell him. And I told him, I said, you hear the term stepdad. And I think I wrote it to him. I said, you hear the term stepdad and you think a broken family. And I told him, I said, you've completed our family. You know, and it's one of those things. It's some families. I mean, we live in sort of a broken world, so to speak. There's pain, there's suffering, there's loss, there's heartache, and it's neat that in light of brokenness, we can really find wholeness as a family. So congratulations on I understand like a relatively recent marriage. Is that right?
Engaged. We'll probably get married
Engaged.
next year. We're also
Okay.
breaking the rules in that you're supposed to be, I guess, married after a year. I was like, absolutely not. We got shit to figure out first.
There you go.
Uh, but yeah, I mean, dude, being a stepdad's awesome. I did not expect it. Did Like I said, I didn't want it because I didn't know what it. You don't really know what you want unless you experience it. And but when I met her. I mean, dang, it just changed my whole world immediately. I didn't care if she had 10 kids, I would have figured it out. But the two kids that came with her, I mean, they're awesome. They're incredible. We game now. It's like I have an excuse to have like a new Xbox now. Like,
Yeah. Got to
we're
do it for the
we're
kids.
yeah, got to do it for the kids. Got to go to the pool for the kids. Got to, get the new Call of Duty for the kids. We got to stop and get ice cream for the kids. We can get a small fry at McDonald's for the kids, like stuff
Yeah.
that you can't really do. But no, I'm at the end of the day, I'm a kid at heart, and I feel like this, like you said, the stepdad, the stigma behind it is very negative, and it's always been kind of lighted that way. And what's great about my scenario is, the dad is actually great, and we have a great relationship, and they have a good partnership when it comes to raising the boys. They're both really good parents. They just got married young. I mean, she was, I think, 18 when she
Yeah.
had her first one, and a lot of Hispanics in the culture is like family. So like even if they're not meant to be together, they just keep making it work or trying to make it work. And then after a while, they just realize, that formula doesn't work out. But they both respect each other, and it's great. And they respect me. He respects me. The boys respect me. So, I think in a way they're going to be like super kids because they're already awesome, but they're going to be way more like their minds are going to develop differently than others because they're getting like two dads and like two moms simultaneously that
Yeah.
and so they've got like getting like love, so like when we spend time with them we want to have fun and do things, so when they get them they get to spend time and have fun with them, so it's like you kind of when you miss them you want it's like that they have this perfect combination of love and protection and just excitement uh, for our scenario, so like uh, you know I know certain families have been through, different things where like maybe the dad's not in the life or,
Right.
but I feel like in this scenario, it is like the best scenario that you
Yeah.
could have asked for being the
Yeah.
stepdad. So, um, yeah,
Well,
I
that's
love it,
cool.
man. So
I
you can totally include that part in your piece.
Well, thank you. I
Uh,
saw it. I saw it in my research of you, my stalking of your Instagram,
yeah,
and I thought it was just a beautiful message there, and I just wanted to pay respect to that, and then also share my own situation a little bit. So, and I do.
thanks,
My
man.
dad has always been in the picture as well. So it's not necessarily a situation where I had an absent father
Yeah.
or a deceased father. So,
Hmm.
but anyway, it's cool. All right. Again, thank you so much,
Yeah,
Ginnard.
man.
You really have been a great guest to have today. So thank you.
Thanks, man. Sounds good. Well, I look forward to seeing it later.